So welcome back. In the previous video, we were talking about what happens when you decrease price from 35 cents to 30 cents. And so what we're going to do is we're going to look at that calculation. Like I told you in the last video, you simply plug in these values, P1, Q1, P2, Q2, into this formula. And this is the formula, and it's going to look like this. This is your P1, this is your P2, this is your Q1, that's your Q2. And you can see that when we calculate this, we're going to get a value of 1.857%. So in other words, this is going to be the absolute value because this number is going to be negative. And the way we interpret that is this good is price elastic because this number is greater than 1. And what this really means is for every 1% change in price, demand will change 1.857%. So you could see that the change in demand is proportionally greater than the change in price. And that goes for anything. So the larger this number, the more and more demand changes given a 1% change in price. That's how you interpret this number. Now, again, we talked about this. Any value greater than 1, it's elastic. Any value less than 1, it's inelastic. So let's look at some real elasticity estimates. You can see airline travel has a price elasticity of about 2.4%, meaning for every 1% change in airfares, I guess how would you call it? The number of seats sold changes by 2.4%. And one of the reasons is because there's lots of competition. The more competition there is in a market, the more sensitive customers become to a change in price, or in other words, the more price elastic they become. So the number of competitors is a determinant of price elasticity. What about restaurant meals? This is also considered to be price elastic. For every 1% change in price, restaurant meals drops or changes by 2.3%. This could be due to competition, especially in a place like San Francisco. But this also has to do with the relationship between necessities and luxuries. Restaurant meals are considered to be luxuries. In other words, you don't have to eat out. And luxuries tend to be more price elastic than necessities. And that kind of makes sense, right? A necessity, by definition, is something that you need. So when the price goes up, demand does not change a lot because it's needed. When the price of restaurant or luxuries go up, since you don't absolutely need it, the demand tends to drop more than necessities. What about the other end of the spectrum here? Inelastic goods. Well, cigarettes. You can see for every 1% price increase in cigarettes, demand drops only 0.4%. And that means these customers of cigarettes are insensitive to a change of price. And why? Well, obviously because cigarettes are addictive. When a good is physically addictive, people tend to be insensitive to changes in price. And that's always a good business model. Look at your customers addicted to your product. And some could say the same thing with coffee, caffeine. And you could see that when you change the price of coffee, demand doesn't change all that much. Now look at this, gasoline. It's also inelastic. And this could be the fact that there are no viable substitutes for fuel in your car. And notice how it says the short run. Because if the price of gasoline continues to go up and is sustained, you could see that people will eventually make changes in their behavior, like buying hybrid fuel cars, moving closer to their work or transportation hubs, public transportation hubs. So another determinant of elasticity, I'm sorry, let me go back here. Another determinant of elasticity is time. The more time you have to adjust for changing prices, the more sensitive you will be to those price changes. This is why in airline travel, when people have to fly last minute, they are charged more. And the reason why airlines charge them more is because they know they can't switch. They don't have enough time to find an alternative. So airlines take advantage of that price inelasticity. They charge you more. When you have a lot of time, customers tend to be more sensitive. So time is a determinant of elasticity, price elasticity. Come on, switch you. So what about some extreme cases of elasticity? Well, when you are talking about a linear demand curve, there are inelastic parts and there are elastic parts of that curve, on that curve. And I'll get to that in a second, it'll be clear. But what happens if customers are incredibly sensitive to change of price? So sensitive that the value of price elasticity is infinity. Well, the demand curve will have a unique shape to it. It will be horizontal. What if customers are completely insensitive? The value of elasticity is 0. Well, then the demand curve will have another unique shape. It'll be vertical. And then it's going to look like this. Most demand curves have a negative slope. This one you can see is horizontal. This one is not negative sloped, it is vertical. And what this says is for a horizontally shaped demand curve, if you increase price just a teeny bit, you sell nothing. That is ultimate sensitivity to a change in price. Here, if you increase price, let's say from P1 to P2, you're still going to sell Q1. Do you see how customers are insensitive to a change of price? No matter what price is charged, you're always going to sell Q1. That's completely insensitive to a change of price. So these demand curves are the only instance where it's either completely elastic or completely inelastic. And so we can relate price elasticity to profit by understanding that determining if a good is price elastic or price inelastic can tell you something about revenue, its change in revenue. So for an elastic good, if you raise price, revenue will fall because demand is falling a lot. So you could see if you got a good that's price elastic, it's not very good for profits for you to raise price because your total revenue will fall. And for inelastic good, if you raise price, it's good for revenues because when you raise price, you do lose a few customers, but not a lot, and your revenues will actually increase. So you could see that price elasticity is very important from a profit point of view because it tells you what happens to your revenue when you change price. Now again, elasticity in general is not only related to profit-oriented businesses. Nonprofits have to be aware of sensitivity analysis because they need to know how their scarce resources are impacting their organization. For example, if you're dedicating, I don't know, advertising money to increase vaccination rates, how sensitive are the people you're trying to reach? How sensitive are they to your dollars spent on advertising? For every dollar of advertising, how much does vaccination rates change? That is also an elasticity analysis, and that's also very important too. So when it comes to determining elasticity, what makes people more or less sensitive to change of price? Well, here's just some 4 generic factors. One, we talked about this, necessities versus luxuries. People tend to be more inelastic when it comes to necessities, more elastic when it comes to luxuries. Now you can understand what is a marketer's job. A marketer's job is to convince people who are consuming luxuries that it's really a necessity. Because once you convince people that they absolutely need something, you could raise price and demand is not going to change that much. Availability of substitutes. When there are more and more substitutes out there, customers become more and more sensitive to change of price. And then relative price to income. When prices are relatively low to your income, you're not very sensitive to change of price. But as prices start to increase, and when you start to spend more and more of your income on a good relative to other goods, you start to become more and more sensitive to a change of price. For example, a 10% change in the price of sugar is not going to change typical consumers' buying habits when it comes to sugar, because they don't spend that much on sugar as a percentage of their overall income. But when there's a 10% change in rent, that could cause a big impact on consumers' behavior because people spend more money on rent as a percentage of their income than they do on sugar. And then we talked about this time. When you're given a lot of time to scope out your decisions, people become very sensitive to change of price. When you have little time, you don't have a lot of options, so people are insensitive to change of price. And so we talked about these necessities versus luxuries. So this is the lowdown on um, sensitivity. So I want you to understand the linkage between price elasticity and law of supply and law of demand, because that's the bridge between supply and demand and elasticities.